What's up, everybody? Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net. And in this video, I'm going to break down the forehand technique of Jannik Sinner and show you what makes it so effective and so powerful. Coming up. All right, so let's jump in and look at some Sinner forehands real quick. But just before we do, make sure you go to Court Level Tennis and check out Liam's channel over there. That's where we got this footage from. He's got a ton of great pro footage over there, so check that out. Now let's jump into the actual technique analysis with Sinner. So I'm going to play some forehands in real time, and I want to see if you can detect the technical difference in what he does in his forehand that makes it so gigantic. So let's let it play. Just a casual rocket there, low short ball, and just crushes that. Cross court, nice and easy, no problem, over and over again. So it's hard to see these things in real time. That's why we want to slow things down. So we're going to do that here real quick, and I'll get into that finer point of what gets him that gigantic power. So as we go through here real quick, first, we see the preparation position, right? This is pretty traditional, and normally what we see from players, right? We tend to see the left hand up on the throat of the racket right here, pretty normal, pretty traditional. We want to get that unit turn and have the left hand up here, right, supporting the throat of the racket as we go through the unit turn. So as you're turning your body, you just want to have that left hand on there. Basically, every player in the world does that for the most part, especially on the ATP side. So as he comes through here and gets his unit turn now, you can see he's really starting to load and coil his body, right? That's pretty typical when we're trying to load up and hit the ball. What he does differently than other players, and we'll just kind of get into the first thing here, is look at the elbow position, right? With a lot of the younger players, their hitting elbow tends to be up by their hitting shoulder. And what that does, if we just go back for 1 second here, is it'll cause the racket to severely tilt during your take back. The racket will be tilted like this. The higher your elbow goes, the more your racket head will be pointed forward. The problem is that's not essential for generating power to have your racket completely tilted forward like this. So Sinner has a little bit of tilt here in the back of his swing. You can see that tilt right there. But because his elbow doesn't lift up way up here, he doesn't have the excessive tilt of someone like a Nick Kyrgios. And for somebody like Kyrgios, when fastballs come in, he has a lot of trouble against pace because of that high elbow position and that severe tilt. It's something that I actually talked about in 2020 with another high-level player, a Division I college tennis player who had a really high tilt, and I was doing some match analysis and talking about how that was a problem on faster balls. At higher levels, having that severe tilt will definitely cause you problems in certain situations. He keeps the elbow down, which is good, minimizes the amount of tilt that he has there, right, with the racket forward. It's not severe because that elbow is not coming up too high, but this is really what separates him from a lot of the players on tour. Look at this position right here. So what do we see, right? We see the racket in this position, and the racket strings are pointed to the back fence. Now, some people might say, well, Jason, that's because of his grip. And we'll get into the grip in a second, and part of that is the grip. But part of that is that he's really loading up and turning the hand, and he's going to uncoil and whip that racket into the ball along with his legs and his hips and his torso. But he's going to have a gigantic flip on his forehand that's going to give him a lot of pace. So let's look at that big flip right here. So look where the racket is, right? What do we see? The tip of his fingers on his left hand are almost lined up with his racket during the takeback. That's how big this flip's going to be. So as we come from here, keep your eye on that. We're going frame by frame, but this is the position that I'm talking about right here. So what do we see with him? We see the tip of his racket head is behind his own elbow. And that is a huge flip. So from where the racket came from, right? Remember, it came from here, all the way from here, all the way to here in a very, very short period of time. That maximizes his racket head speed. And with as slight as he is, it makes sure that he can hit a gigantic forehand. So let's go back for a second again, right here. Look where the racket comes from. If we watch it in real time, watch quickly here. Look at that, how quick that happens, okay? So again, from here in real time, that gigantic move happens, you know, in a fraction of a second. And that's part of what gives him so much racket head speed, okay, as slight as he is. So let's go back for 1 second. One other thing I want to talk about here real quick is his grip. So if we just look at his index knuckle position on his hitting hand, right, which is the right hand for him for a righty, That's on the fourth bevel of the racket when he's gripping the racket, okay? And his heel pad of his hand, you can't see that from here, but it's also probably lined up on the fourth bevel. So it's a very strong semi-Western grip. He's on that fourth bevel, almost on the fifth bevel, but solidly on the fourth one. If he was to be on the fifth one, he'd be in a jack sock position. He'd be in a full Western grip. He's not there, but he's in a very strong semi-Western grip, and that's something we're seeing with a lot of the younger players. So if we just go back for a second and you talk about this position right here, right? Part of the reason he's getting this extreme position right here is because he has that grip, that base knuckle on the fourth bevel of the racket. That's part of the reason, but it's not the only reason the racket is going back there, and we'll show and talk about something in a little bit. But again, look at the gigantic here flip position, solid semi-Western grip, and again, look at the tip of the racket. The tip of the racket gets behind the elbow, okay? Humongous move. So if you want a bigger forehand, keep your hand and arm relaxed as you go through this, rotate your body, concentrate on getting your contact out in front, and get that tip of the racket to flip behind your elbow by staying relaxed, okay, and generating a ton of racket head speed. From here, he does what's pretty traditional, especially in a low ball. So here's something that you can pick up too if you're struggling with topspin. The tip of your racket head here should be below your hitting hand at contact with the ball, okay? And if it's not, if it's even or it's above, you're going to hit flatter balls, you're going to struggle to generate topspin. So again, make sure when you're contacting these balls, the tip of your racket head is below your hand. It's really excessive for him, so it's really low below the hitting hand because it's such a low ball and he needs to really hit up, so keep that in mind as well. And then there's the follow through, right? And something we can see on the follow through position, this is something I want you to pay attention to. His racket head here will point towards his opponent as he finishes the shot. It'll be pointing towards his opponent or towards the net like that as he follows through and finishes. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other technical things that are going on within this stroke, but I really wanted to point out what separates him power-wise from a lot of the other younger players on tour, and it's really this gigantic flip of the racket in a very short period of time that allows him to hit the ball so hard. And now I'm going to prove it to you real quick. So let's do a side-by-side with Sinner hitting a harder stroke and also hitting a softer one. All right, so from that same practice session, this time we've got Sinner on the right side over here hitting a really slow forehand. And over here, he's hitting that low ball that he ends up cranking, kind of out of the park. So let's just take a look at these here real quick. And what we see, right, are, again, the similarities that we saw before. So the same type of preparation basically on the stroke, right? Everything basically looks the exact same here that it did before in his preparation position. We're going to notice a couple of different things here on the right versus the left. So on the left, he's hitting a much slower ball. Look at the racket face. It's not pointed to the back fence like it is on the right. So he hasn't turned his hand and cocked his hand as much as he does on the faster ball on the right. So that's one big thing that stands out to us right away. Another thing that we can see here is that on the left here, on the slower one, right, the one he's not going to hit as hard, he hasn't coiled his upper body as much as he has on the right either. He's also not bending as much. He's not loading as much. Remember, you're not arming these shots. You're using your entire body. Your arm is part of the sequence, but it's not the entire thing. So as we come forward from here, right, we see the difference in the racket face position. So even though he's got that semi-Western grip, it's not pointed to the back fence on a slower ball. Let's see what happens here now. And this is really where we see the big difference. Again, we talked about this before. The tip of his racket head when he's hitting the rocket is going to be behind the hitting elbow at the end of this backswing sequence, and the butt cap's going to be pointed forward. The butt cap is pointed forward on this slower ball on the left, but the tip of his racket is not behind his hitting elbow. It hasn't moved nearly as much as it did on the other shot. Again, look at the difference in the position here. The racket face is more pointed towards the back wall when he's going to really let it rip compared to the one on the left. And then the other difference that we see is the tip of the racket head does not get behind the hitting elbow right here like it does over here on the right side when he's really trying to generate pace, okay? Now let's look at the actual stroke as it unfolds. You can see the contact here, right? He's rotated, but not as much as he has on the right side of the screen where he's really letting this one rip, and then he follows through in both strokes. Let's watch it in real time. And again, in real time, tell me if you can see the difference between the two strokes besides the speed. You can see on the right side, the one that he's ripping over here, it has already hit the back fence. And the one on the left that he's hit much slower, his opponent hasn't even struck the ball, and his opponent is just behind the baseline. So this ball arrived to the back fence before his opponent is even hitting the one on the left that's much slower. So watch it one more time. Ripping on the right, more casual and easy on the left. So again, the technical differences that are kind of taking place there that we can clearly see. He's not loading his body as much. He's not coiling as much. The racket face is not turned towards the back fence when he's hitting this softer, gentler ball. And the amount his racket flips from this position to this position is considerably less. And the tip of the racket head is not behind his hitting elbow. All right, so that wraps it up for our technique analysis of Jannik Sinner's forehand. If you found this video helpful or you feel like you learned something today, make sure you smash that like and subscribe button. I'm Jason Frausto for tennisunleashed.net. We'll see you next time.